EverQuest, the year 1999. Jesus. Well, thanks for coming out. You know, it's, how shall we say, cold as fuck out there. So thank you for coming out. I honestly say that. You know, I brought my personal mathematician along to help with this shit. So do not worry. He's right over there. Right here. Right. Guess I should read poems. One of the great poets was John Keats, and he had a not so pleasant death at the age of 25. And you know, he was a doctor who basically treated himself with the cutting-edge TB treatments of the year 1820, which involved bleeding himself and starving himself. So that didn't help. But you know, he had a wonderful run as a poet. If you don't know John Keats, you will in my IFP class if you're my students. And I do see some of you here, for which I'm thankful. This is a poem for John Keats. I figured I'd start with a really dark, depressing poem just to get you in the mood. You know, I think there's some funny ones in here, but you know, it's poetry, right? It doesn't make you hate life. It's bad. It's called Eternal City. Keats died in Rome. A golden key migrates through my pockets where it hurts. When it rains, alchemical light pierces the denim. A glow that nearly reaches my eye. I give myself one night before the key becomes necessary. I toss the dice I've been using as ice cubes. They don't help in winter. My take on all this won't exist until I can silhouette each part of it. My arm is torn up from lacing itself into the search that is living. My own search has been shorted, but I still have the other arm, which means I can show you the glint of my empty palm in summary. Do me one thing. Trace a window facing east each time I fail to wink at dawn. That was the spirit. He keeps rolling his sleeves All right. This next poem, I'm actually not sure if I've read this one, so I'm going to skip it for now. I'll read it if I still have time. In my last reading, I read a couple of poems from a series about photography. You know, my dad's a photographer, and you know, I just do it for fun. But it's a lot of fun. This is parts 3 through 5 of a series called Icons of Reality, which I stole from somewhere. I'm not going to tell you where. But, you know, it belongs to me now. This is part 3 of Icons of Reality. The title is Henri, who, you know, Henri Cartier-Bresson was a famous French photographer. So, part 3 is called Henri. The French photographer says he's never been to India, especially its stomach. I tell him he'll get used to it. He says I may carry his equipment bag and see what he does, but that I may never photograph him. His invisibility is necessary. He walks fast, sometimes dashing to hide just before he lifts his camera to make an instant drawing. I name all my favorite pictures of his, He barely remembers them. You must be receptive, he says. Recollection darkens the world, he says. Simple as that. He gives Gandhi a book of poems the hour Gandhi dies. They are poems of mortality. Gandhi says death. What does death matter? The photographer shows up after lunch to find Gandhi laid in flowers. He follows the funeral procession, accompanying life, giving evidence. Part 4, cheap cameras, dedicated to great Russian photographer Georgy Pinkasov, who, takes lots of great pictures on his iPhone and disposable cameras and things. Cheap cameras. We see with our brains, not with our eyes. Any camera, therefore, is blind. Just wait and think. Living pictures dance among the bus feeders, the train-mounted herdsmen. Make yourself a cranial tandem. The way a day collapses into a camera, the ways a day collapses into the camera are only material love. You want more than that. Now go ahead and ask, don't you? You want to spot the beautiful girl and shout a sudden word at her, any word, to make her stop smiling. And then just shoot her legs. Startled legs are what you want. Part 5, the decisive moment. A drained nerve feels the eye back, its blood-fed tapestry, vectors, echoes, heals. Wind blows the same way twice, tidings as imprecise as lightning. The problem is a rifleman's problem, which is only louder, a matter of life. The camera, iron ring, invisibly close to the front element. Rodin's hands, clutching the fractions of a second in bronze, the opposite of memory. Sight, able to climb quick rays. Recycling paper in the computer. Lucretius and labored to write almost infinite volume. Okay. Well, that's fine. Was I voting for my intercession class here? Damn it. Well, this is a poem one of the poems I wrote for that class, so you're good. You're not going to be amused, but the rest of you guys might be. This is called Strategies for Getting the Most Out of Your Timeshares. I'm from Florida, okay? Timeshares are big. You let me name your dog the Flying Dutchman. Him I love best. But nothing figured my skin the way your kisses did the first time your dad caught us fucking on the dainty antique quilt without even the lights off. We've known such together since we were old enough to regret a good thing. I've done something you would want to know of. I've shuffled all the shingles we share. I've replaced all your cursive teeth marks with scars lit white. They fade into shallow smiles. I've tallied all the batteries we've kept warmed over, back when light fed us. I've counted all the locks I can't change. There aren't enough doors, in fact, on all the game show stages on Earth to hide what I've won and squandered. All right. This is another series, kind of a fleshed out three-part series. I like writing poems about music. You know, I really like playing music best. Words are a weak approximation of what music does, at least for me. This is a poem essentially about a famous guitar. Right, a great Martin guitar, which was played by a few great players. Right, it started out kind of in a pawn shop in our memory, and great player named Clarence White played it. Then he was run over by a car, and one of ex-students managed to track the guitar down. Now he plays it, Tony Rice. If any of you guys are guitar players, you might know the name Tony Rice. He plays this beat up, nasty guitar that sounds amazing. And, it's sort of been dragged through a lot of things. So, and the cool thing is, Tony first heard this guitar played by Clarence White when he was about 14 years old, at a concert. And he just was transfixed. Then 10 or so years later, he had it. And, it was sad, but how he's played it for the last 40 years. This is part one, called Tony Rice First Hears the D28. Tony is 14 and too tall. He's always craning his neck for what people think is peeking. But he needs his long nose and even his tongue and his gastric ear more than he ever needs to look at things. Tonight, he watches the fingers of a man he will only remember is bearded. For the life of him, Tony is not that good at tying knots. It is as if the bearded man, who seems to look off beyond the heads of the audience through entire numbers, is squeezing out each note by trigger. The sound rockets off stone. The guitar the bearded man plays glows red-black. It has a cheap fingerboard and not much volume in it, but it makes the gutsiest sound Tony will hear in his life. Tony raises his hands to clap. He's the odd one doing it. Everyone else sits still. Happily, he cannot hear himself clap. As the song ends, Tony continues the melody in the applause by singing it, unaware that there is nothing more for the others to hear. Part 2. Clarence White dies with the D28. Here, I am empty as the morning. Just as well, I can't see the sound hole because everything that comes out of it, I don't recall putting in. I guess that's what they agreed on in front of the buffing wheel. The car slides away, misdirecting the light always. My guitar sends fireworks up, and a pause for breath, until the air is full of blossomed light. I forget where the sun is. The wood beats against my chest like the body of a bird. I lean and breathe against it. Somehow, my hand forgets the shallow pick. I remember all things fitting their place, a push in my ears, the wildwood flower twining my head over and over. All right, part 3. Tony Rice finds the D-28. The club owner has died. His name is ugly, which is to say it was never anything but faded. Tony has offered the man fair money, hell, more than fair, for the old Martin box. Unlike himself, he won't leave the man's widow in peace. 500 is a number she's happy to hear. I'll just be buying another box, she says. Tony does not look at the road on his way back to the motel. In his room, lines drawn, Tony lets the cheap case fall apart in his hands. The strings are roughened and black. The sound hole has long since been scored and enlarged. The scarred wood excised. The fingerboard is green with grime. Having found the way to play his mind some years back, Tony begins to play. The guitar is not loud, and the bad strings seem to be whacking tin cans. Tony does not turn from the wall of the motel room for a long time. He won't remember what's coming out. Mostly short hymns, played hard. All right. Let's see here. Rahul mentioned that I delivered newspapers. I did that every morning for about 6 years. You know, all through undergrad and then later when I worked other jobs. It really sucked. You know, we're working full-time job and then getting up at like 4 o'clock and doing that every day. It's sort of that witching hour. Like between 4 and 6 in the morning, the temperature drops about 10 degrees. You know, and you really notice it. But this is not about the temperature dropping, but you know, this is a poem called Night Mode, and it's about that. You know, it's recent poem. Night Mode. I've unlearned how to sleep. Somehow, I've rectangled the sky. Problem is, some shapes are not meant to be rebound. I've tripled and trembled, becoming a wreck that makes sense. 2 paychecks a week, no receipts, 80, 90 hours. It doesn't take a stretch on the air mattress to get enough brain swag back to work out even in my wax-blocked head that money only equals time if time keeps the lights on, the car spewing fog, and enough plants to vent the dim house. I nap away sunlight. Then I apply myself to aggressive breathing. It only makes the night brighter, which is only part of what I want. The half-light of dawn bothers me because the sky is lit from beneath, which is only right to those who must see possibilities. I don't look that way too much. Before I go to the bank each Sunday, before it closes at noon, before I get any sleep at all, I look at each dollar bill, each coin, until all the repetitive words and Masonic symbols at last start to resemble new words and things I've never hoped for. All right. Next poem I wrote about 20 minutes before coming here. It's the IFP sort of all-nighter model of poetry writing. And, you know, like I was sitting in the computer room with Emily earlier, and that's what I was doing. So, you know, it's not super long, but I'm going to inflict it on you anyway. I'm going to read this quick, get it over with. This poem is called Feedback Linearization. This is the title of this poem, Feedback Linearization. I found the storm finally. It was gleaming in the gutter. Last time I looked, up from the carcass I couldn't finish by myself. The dark had sucked up all the storm's colors, making a flag out of the wet concrete. I never meant to country an aftermath, though mistakes must always happen. What frame does an empty world have that shows up only in rushing water? I wish I had traded pains for bricks, memory for time. All right, this is the last poem I have. Thank God. You're almost in the clear. Right? Just so you know. This is a collaborative poem. I wrote this poem with a friend of mine who is originally from Baltimore, now a grad student in Colorado, Boulder. Lily Duffy. Some of you guys know her. None of the undergrads, hopefully. But yeah, she's a whatever. Yeah. She's a hell of a poet, but we get some good writing done, over Skype. It's fun. And I want somebody to explain what this poem means in class, during my class. Explain what this poem means, on Friday. I'll give you, a free A if you can do that. And this poem is titled Bustier. Didn't come finger-pricked in another sleeping bag for show. Rip lid and untwist. You and that fox absorb the same light, sometimes for money. Not the kind of money a body makes, screwing, mind you, but not without its benefits. I always imagined you snowblind and ceramic, wearing the sleeping bag like a great cloak, feathers pricking up from its skin. What keeps idiocy from drowning is impeccable timing. Your brother exercises tact in not shitting himself at the conference table. Of course, it's not Tuesday. The weather also sounds like the swirl your brother so wants to hear. I mean, you never wanted to bring the pie, though I always brought dial tone, bleeding through slits in the peripherals, but we were never asleep, and getting dressed was like dying on a field trip. Comme ci, comme ça. You knew how to drive stick, but the hand that did your knob work was always sweaty, which does affect reaction time, though the ride was always shorter. I, thinking a swallowed blossom doesn't turn to shit, drew up plans for a crater. Your brother's just caught a penny in his mouth. Oh, someone fetch the backdrop. Let us weep. It turns out the penny cured him better than Big Pharma, better than evidence for love. The trees repeat cartoon. Then they maraud. I'm still stuttering in the tub while you comb granaries for scrap metal, practically drooling. You are not what stays in a colander, and the jewels nestled in my neck hollow like sap, or what of them? A shape made twice, both times, turns up startled, vaguely facial, hardly at all. Everything put out, candles tapped to mimic retort, so paid for by answer. What we want is an answer. You and that fox. A table long enough to lose voice in. All right, put that in your